Greetings, everyone. My name is Justin Reich. I'm the Executive Director of the Teaching Systems Lab, and we're here for the final course wrap of Design Thinking for Leading and Learning. Super grateful that folks can be here. If you're watching this live, there's a chat in the upper right next to the video where people have already started introducing themselves and say hi. If you haven't done that yet, please do so, especially please tell us where you're from. We already have people from Argentina, Brazil, Australia, Croatia, Denmark, upstate New York, Brazil, and would love to hear where everyone else is from. So please be sure to let us know. We have two guests with us today. Both of them are participants in the course. So we have Edson Tavares, who's joining us from Brazil, and then Alicia Chase, we're going to get logged on in just a couple of minutes here, and she'll be able to join us as well. And our goal for this final live event is just to have a conversation about what kinds of things people have been learning, experiencing, doing, engaging in while they're in the course, to take your questions and hear what you're interested in, and have me and then a couple representative students talk about those things for a little while and just celebrate all the terrific work and reflection that folks have been doing in this course. So Edson, let me start by asking you a few questions. Maybe you can just start by taking a minute to introduce yourself. You can say who you are and where you're from, what work you do, and then maybe sort of what are the kinds of things that you're working on this week, so we can get a sense of the kinds of things you're working on.
Okay, sure. Well, my name is Edson Tavares. I'm from Brazil. I live in São Paulo. I'm married with no children yet. And I work with foreign business. I have a trade company here in Brazil. So I import electronics, especially high technology electronics, from all around the world, but mainly from Asia, China, India. And I start to study design thinking in projects for startups. I also work with some startups here in São Paulo, startup projects, and design thinking became a word very famous here because everybody is looking for it now. There are a lot of books being launching about this and different aspects, and you know. The concept for this of the design thinking for me is very similar to PDCA in logistics that I study.
You say what PDCA stands for?
Yeah, PDCA is plan, do, study, and act. It's a cycle very similar to what we learn in design thinking. So in design, the methodology is a little bit different because logistics, of course, there are a lot of other challenges. But it was great for me. This kind of methodology that I studied with MIT was great. Learn a lot about the application in schools, in education was a really new thing for me. But I'm thinking become a teacher, so it was great have this time to study this methodology.
Terrific, yeah. So it's cool to hear that you've had these previous experiences, and I think a bunch of people in the course felt the same way, that the ideas of design thinking have been described in other kinds of places. So you describe them as part of this plan, do, check, act cycle, or as other kinds of cycles. That have been the engineering design process, agile software development, and I think part of hopefully what we can offer is to help people see how these things apply in an education context. So that's great to hear. Now we just had Alicia. Alicia has been working very hard all day. Got a special waiver from her principal to be able to join us here today. So Alicia, if you talk, can we hear you?
I hope so.
Hooray!
I wasn't able to. Are we good?
We good. We got you. Terrific, Alicia. Can you introduce yourself as well? Thanks for making the time to be here from upstate New York. It's hopefully a beautiful afternoon there. Can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what your role is, where you work, and what kinds of things you're working on this week?
So I am a K-5 technology teacher. I'm new to this job this year, and I teach in 2 different elementary buildings. And this week, I actually got on board with the Global Design Day that was yesterday. And
Cool.
I've had all of my students in all of my classes, well, in between the state testing, of course, doing some designing depending on the grade level that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Great, that's terrific. And were they collaborating with other people, or were they doing it within their classrooms, or?
Well, so they were coming into my lab to work. So for instance, my 5th graders are working on projects about planets, and they are partnered, and they are designing Prezzies. My 4th graders are doing Scratch games. And then my K1 kids, we actually did paper airplanes, which surprisingly enough was extremely exciting. I was told yesterday that it was the best tech class ever. So I think I'm working too hard.
Well, I think that's such a great example. I'm pretty sure that there's some MIT classes that also do some things with paper airplanes. I mean, the advantage of paper airplanes is that they have clearly measurable outcomes. I mean, you can come up with some more subjective things, but if you want to, you can use distance, you can use height, you can use other things. And they're really amenable to rapid iteration.
Yes, absolutely.
All kinds of interesting principles. So that makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, actually, we've just been talking with a bunch of folks at code.org and how much effort they put into creating learning experiences that are about programming and about computational thinking, but don't use computers at all.
Right.
But actually, one of the ways that we can level the playing field between people who have more or less experience in a domain is to try to teach them concepts kind of from outside of the domain. So they have all kinds of exercises that are about teaching people loops and precision and iteration and all these kinds of things. So sounds like a terrific project to be working on. Now, Alicia, how familiar were you with design thinking before you started the course? Was this something that you'd done some other research with, or was this course sort of your first kind of experience with the language or ideas of design thinking? How would you describe that?
I would say definitely my first experience with the language and the formalized concept of design thinking. The more that I'm doing design thinking, so I was a kindergarten teacher in my previous life for about 25 years, and truly teaching kindergarten is very much about design thinking. So what I'm discovering is I really was doing a lot of this. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the name for it. I didn't have the vocabulary for it, but having this formalized process has really helped me to focus in on the process of design itself, how it can be sort of, melded into the classroom, how students can take more control of their learning. And I'm excited because my school district is has just formed an innovation team, which I'm a member of. And I've said to them, oh my God, these last 2 courses that I've taken, launching innovation and design thinking, I've got all the good stuff for you guys. I've got all the stuff, so I'm excited to get going.
Well, that's very, very much what we're hoping is that the people who are in this course will, all this. We're going to find other ways to do other facilitated runs, and we may change the format. But for the foreseeable future, all these materials should be online in archive mode for people to be able to look at and share. And that's exactly what we hope people do, is that you can take bits of them and say, oh, these would be the 3 things that I think would really help our group have some good conversations and get launched. So I hope that people feel like they can take all the pieces and use them. And even, people probably realize this, but you can click on any video and let the little YouTube watermark and see it outside of the edX platform on YouTube and things like that. Yes. So great way for people to access that. Let's talk a little bit about Unit 1 and sort of your first experiences in the course. What parts of Unit 1, sort of stick with you the most? What parts were the most valuable? What parts are most challenging, both in terms of the content and then in terms of the exercises that you did? And for folks in the chat, if anybody wants to ask any questions or jump in, I have a bunch of things that I'm interested in learning from Alicia and Edson, but feel free to jump in with your own questions and we can put them up to the group and things like that. But Edson, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience in Unit 1 and what was new or useful or interesting or challenging for you there?
Sure. Me and Alicia, we have something in common because we have an interaction experience between, you know, husband and wife, as far as I remember. So it was very challenging for us to know the main problem on the Unit 1 was this interaction with the user. You know, the challenges were get the user's feedback, the user's attention, because everybody is in a hurry every day, so they don't get much time to pay attention, and even don't know if the project you are doing will really make a difference in their lives. So they don't expect something that you are trying to show. So I think that the main challenge was this, to get the user feedback and to really understand, have this kind of empathy that in the end of the course we concluded that. So this, I think, this is the most important part of the Unit 1.
Yeah, that's actually something that strikes a lot of people as we do this work with MIT students. We had one MIT mechanical engineering graduate who recently said, you know, almost every problem that I got in classes had the set of specifications associated with it. You know, we sort of figured out it needs to be this many pounds and this long and these kinds of other things. And actually part of what he got excited about with some of this design work is, you know, what's the step before you have the set of specifications? What's the lived experience of the person who's going to be using and making use of these designs, and how can you think about that and have it shape what you're doing? How about for you, Alicia? What in Unit 1 was new or useful or challenging? Or
well, so my user was my husband, and so the conversations that Edson and I had back and forth is that when you're very familiar with a person, you have a tendency to assume things or put words into their mouth, or maybe want to do things for them, or basically tell them what to do. And so, so I really had to think about that, especially in terms of working with my students, that I am not the user. And I think sometimes teachers forget that when we are teaching the students something, whatever it happens to be, we're not the user. So we really need to think about who our user is, and that makes getting feedback from them and having them be part of the process much more important. So for instance, in doing this planet project with my fifth graders, we talked about who is your user, and they really struggled with, like, who are you designing this planet project for? Is it your teacher? Is it your classmates? Or is it me? And so defining your user, I think, is a very important first step. And then really not trying to make any assumptions about what your user wants or needs, and let them define what that should be.
Well, there's so much that we do in schools where, you know, there kind of is no user. You know, we ask people to do exercises that a student will turn into to a teacher, but there's not really a sort of authentic audience, an authentic user. And I think that's one of the dispositions that we, you know, and I'm certainly not opposed to that for lots of the kinds of things. You know, my daughter's in kindergarten this year, and if someone wants to have her, you know, do flashcards to, you know, learn sight words or to, you know, learn her addition tables, like, I have no problem with that. That's part of what people should do in school. We should learn facts, that's fine. But I hope that's complemented by things where she feels like she is creating things for an audience, for a group of people. So I think that's great. You know, and the idea that, I mean, I think it's so easy in curriculum design. I actually do this with my pre-service students. A lot of times when they create lesson plans or other kinds of things, it's a long description of what teachers are going to do, and saying, no, like, what are students going to do? I love that idea that, you know, really trying to remember that we're not the user. So then, Alicia, you sort of focused mostly on Unit 2 for the rest of the course and the assignments. And can you tell us a little bit about, you know, how that went, and particularly sort of how you interacted with students and colleagues around that, and what kind of things you learned from the people around you in your community?
Well, so I went to the building that I'm currently in has 2 fifth grade classes. And I went to the 2 teachers and I spoke to them about, do you have something going on currently in your classroom where I can kind of meld my assignment here, what I'm trying to do with something that you're doing. So they were both moving into this planet project where the students had to, and the 2 classes are working differently, but the 2 students, or the 2 classes the students had to produce some type of project about a planet in the solar system. One teacher was very creatively asking her students to, they have to create a project where they have to create an alien that could live on that planet based on what they have learned about that planet, the atmosphere, the topography, whatever. And so the thing that I was focusing, the part of the design process I was focusing on for Unit 2 was prototyping. So what I had the students do was whatever their teacher was requiring for that project, I wanted to have a conversation with them about prototyping. So thinking about, who your user is, what information do you want to give them? How do you want to present that? Do you want to use graphics? Do you want to use sound? Do you want to use video? And then sit down and prototype. I think students are very, at that age, they have some pretty good technical skills, and they really want to get on the computer and get at designing, which there's nothing wrong with that. But to kind of crystallize their thoughts before they sat down at the keyboard. So I had them paper prototyping with their partners, how they imagined their final project would look. And then using that paper prototype to go to other students in their class and having them look at their prototype and say, is this communicating what I want it to? What do you think I could do that would be better, et cetera. And so that's where we are right now. We've had some major technical difficulties with the server at school. We've had state testing. So we're in a little bit of a lull right now, but hopefully by Friday, we'll be getting back to that.
Well, it's great for, those are the kinds of things that real designers encounter as well. The challenges of technology and the rest of our lives and all those kinds of things. So hopefully those are good experiences. That's great. That sounds like such a great little project slice to say, here's the kind of thing that maybe our students would have done as kind of a one and done thing, or jumped straight to design, and giving them some other ways of helping them rapidly think through, what are good strategies to share ideas rather than in low fidelity ways before trying high fidelity things.
Right.
So Edson, you were more focused on Unit 3, and it would be great to hear about sort of your assignment and what you were working on there, and what some of the challenges were, and what some of the pieces you feel like you most learned from that.
Yes, because I don't work directly on as teacher or as a student now, I choose the Unit 3 because felt more comfortable for me to look for something that was I was able to perform. So I choose a macroeconomic problem, which is the education reform that is happening now in Brazil, because I'm very worried about this, mainly because they are not focused on the students. As far as I'm concerned, and during my research, I discovered that all this education reform is being based on the school interests. So I'm a little bit worried, I'm a little bit worried about this. And I searched for a lot of data in the Ministry of Education. I also performed a questionnaire using the SurveyMonkey, to get more feedback from people that I know. Unfortunately, the people that I know is more ex-students. I didn't get so much attention from students. That was my main objective. I tried to send to some schools, but it's very difficult to have this kind of feedback. But I think that the structure that I prepared, for my study was okay. It can be applied for in a school, for example, do this research with the students and get the proper feedback. So I got a little bit, a little bit sad because I didn't get the answers that I was looking for, but in meantime, I discovered that I did my job well done, because I discovered some things, and now I have to repeat the cycle again. So adjust, and but for sure, that's a conclusion that I can make, that our education reform should be looking more to the students' needs. So that's a concern that I have to send back to the authorities, or maybe to people that I know, maybe try to do something with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that observation that, one of the things about this process is that it's not supposed to work every time. You're not supposed to take on challenges that reliably lead to conclusions that we can describe as correct. And, that's a hard thing to fit in in any kind of educational system. I think it's great. I think the other thing is that I have some colleagues actually at the Harvard Graduate School of Education who are really interested in design thinking and human-centered design in policy conversations or policy efforts. A lot of what international education policy is sort of driven by this idea that we're going to find these things that work, and then we're going to replicate them in lots of other places. And when you take something that works in one context and you try to replicate it somewhere else, a lot of times you find it doesn't work. Because the things that work become local, they become created. So there's there's a lot of work that's being done in different places. You heard a little bit about that from Amelia in Unit 3, talking about some of the kinds of things that she was doing. So it's great to have some people tackling some huge big picture policy things, and then some classroom activities as well. So we had a great question in the chat forum from Fabio, where he asked, is it possible to apply design thinking if your user's not willing to collaborate? And Alicia, I was wondering if you could talk about that, just with to what extent do you feel like your students were actively collaborating with you and designing some of the things you're doing? And then as you're asking them to think about who the user is, how much do you feel like, how much do you feel like, that challenge came up in the work that you were doing with students, or you were asking students to do with their teachers or colleagues, or other kinds of things like that?
Yeah, I mean, no question. If someone doesn't have sort of the language or the vocabulary or the experience, just communicating what you want them to do or what you're trying to sort of get them to do can be a challenge. And I think I had mentioned, I don't know where I wrote this, if it was I used to think, or in somewhere else in one of the assignments, but certainly my husband was a willing guinea pig. He's a retired teacher, and so he was very willing to play along. But when I worked with the 5th graders and I would pull the kids aside and get feedback, I would have to say to them, please be honest, you're not going to hurt my feelings, and you will help me become a better teacher. And they're 5th graders, so they're not really comfortable with talking to an adult sort of as a peer and sharing their feelings. And they don't know what they don't know. So all they can compare what I'm asking them to do is what they already know how to do. And so I will say that part of the disconnect, and in fact, I just had a conversation with my principal about this yesterday, was that we have a tendency in public schools to kind of create the Stepford child. The children who want, and they, as they go up through the grade levels, they very much want to be spoon-fed. Tell me how to get an A in this class, and I will do exactly that. And so when you start giving them these tasks that are kind of open-ended, and where I'm saying, I'm not going to judge your final product. And one of the things I'd written, of course, for me is that it's process, process, process. That's what I was looking for. But they are focused on the final product. So what does my final product need to look like? Well, what do you think it needs to look like? So I think they definitely struggled with that. And I had to very much resist the temptation to not give them what I thought they should do.
Mm.
Some kids are very comfortable. Some kids are risk takers. Some kids are okay with being wrong or what they perceive to be wrong. And some kids very much are not. And I think the public school system, we do that. And that's a disservice. And that's one of the reasons why I believe design thinking is so important, because we really need to move students away from that cookie cutter perform in this way, because that may work well for how the state or the federal government wants to assess their readiness or whatever, but it doesn't really serve them very well for going out into the real world of work and the kind of work and careers, by the way, that they are going to be facing at that point in the future.
You know, one thing it makes me think of too that might be a sort of unique challenge of using design in education is that you have that range, you know, you've got 17 or 25 or 27 kids in your class, however it is, and some of them are totally ready to jump into this, and some of them are really resistant, and actually the resistant ones probably need a different experience than the ones who are ready to go. You want to sort of maximize freedom, choice, let them explore, let them fail. And with the others, you probably want to give them a little bit more of that step-by-step, but you want to give those kids the step-by-step without making it available to the other kids, you know, for whom that would actually become a constraint. So that kind of differentiation in this sort of design, I think is really hard. I mean, another thing which I think really helps, you know, it'd be interesting as you keep sort of playing with these ideas, whether or not this ends up resonating with you over time. But my hope would be that as within these fifth graders, within other communities that you work with, as you get students engaged in the design process, as they give feedback to one another, like they learn some of those skills of like, oh, okay, this is how I give feedback to someone else. And like, now I can give feedback to my teacher. Sure. You know, like this is just the thing right. to do, which is giving feedback. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, as you play around with these things more, whether your students develop more fluency.
Right.
One of the things that I went to the sort of one of the most senior teachers at the very first school I worked at and asked him for advice on becoming a better teacher. And he said, one of the things that would actually is pretty helpful is to have someone else come in and interview your students about how you're doing.
Yes.
There was one day in the fall or spring, my first year teaching, where I gave up half a class period and left, and he came in, and he was well liked and well respected, and he interviewed my students essentially on my behalf. You know, because I wasn't there, they could really say whatever they wanted, but also because he was a teacher, you know, when they say things like, oh, Mr. Wright gives too much homework, he'd be like, no, actually, Mr. Wright doesn't give too much homework, you're fine. But tell me about other things that we should be talking about here. You know, he could do some kind of filtering. So that may be another strategy too, is to use kind of circles or cycles of things. But speaking of feedback, I'd love for you all to share a little bit about, you know, we're going to put some more energy into improving this course, into adding new materials, into doing different kinds of things. We'd just love to hear what suggestions you have on parts of the course that we could work more on, things that you thought didn't make as much sense or weren't as helpful, things that you want to dig into more. Edson, do you have any thoughts about what we should be doing in the next round of the course? And obviously anybody in the chat window should feel free to share too. Sure.
Well, I really like the chapters that showed different ways to teach, like the Eureka Lab, like Epic Solutions, and also Nouveau Studios, right? These three videos, I got really excited about to hear this, because we didn't have such things here in Brazil yet. Is also something that we can manage to benchmarking and make something up from this to adapt it to our market. I got really interested in this kind of approach, and see how, because, you know, in the United States, the education the level is very high, comparing to countries like Brazil and all Latin America. So it's very interesting for us to see examples of different ways of study, different ways to have students' attention, and this, I think, it was the most interesting for me.
Great. No, that's super helpful. And we definitely want to create more of those case studies. Those are, it's interesting. Those are, I mean, I think they're the most valuable. They're definitely sort of the most expensive parts of the course to produce. They require the most coordination and the most filming and those other things.
I can imagine.
I think the other thing that we are not happy with is that they're all from New England. And part of that, again, was just sort of being efficient and so forth. But we're really hoping we're going to have to come to Alicia's classroom in upstate New York and do a field trip up there. And it would be great to have a set of case studies for the next design thinking course that brought in people from the first round of design thinking course. But Alicia, what would your suggestions be for improving the course, or parts that you thought we should do more of or less of or change? Or
well, I guess just very selfishly, since you're asking me, because of where I am in my head and in this whole process and professionally, I think the two courses that you've done, Launching Innovations and then the Design Thinking, I think there could be a step somewhere in between, so that some of those activities. And this is actually what I'm going to try and do. So I'll let you know how successful I am. And maybe I'll be using your material, but maybe you can tap into it.
Yeah.
Because I want to take some of those did in Launching Innovation, where we are trying to get together as a school community and say what is important to us. That try one new thing a day. And then do that with the design thinking process. Because I think those two concepts are really two things that you could bring together. It would have been great for me in both of these classes, actually, and I did try very hard it would have been great if I could have gotten a team of people from my school district to do the class together. And I know you tried very hard. You were giving us that sort of push to do that, and I really tried, and people are where they are in their lives and everything. And the materials will be available, and I have been sharing them with my principals. But I could see where you could take those activities anyway from the Launching Innovation, and I think that would give people, it would give me sort of an idea of how am I going to wrap my arms around this? How do I take design thinking, because it is such a new thing for my school. It is innovative, and so how can I launch this innovative design thinking process in my school? So I'm going to see if I can't find a way to meld those two together, and I think that would actually be sort of a great course, just to kind of combine the two, or a half step between the two.
Putting them together. Well, definitely one thing, when you do that in your own school, if you put together some kind of experience for the for your administrators or a group of faculty or something like that, definitely let us know, because we could, be one of the things that we're thinking about are like, what are some other ways that we could represent the course? What are some other formats that we could take? You could imagine that we if you developed a workshop with some different components from the course in it, like we could make it a page on our website and put some things in order and things like that. And that might be fun for us to play around with and explore. So that's helpful.
Okay. I will do that.
Yeah, pass it along. So if folks online have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Some of them have been ones that we can just kind of answer by typing away. I know that you guys already put in the course, but Alicia and Edson, it would be great to hear your I used to think, but now I think reflections. What are some of the, how did you frame up your sort of final insights from the course? Edson, what was your I used to think, but now I think? You don't have to say it exactly. You can paraphrase.
Yeah, I used to think and just think and not prototype anything, Just have good ideas is not enough, I think that the design thinking now, when I have an idea, I really try to get the minimum value, the minimum way to at least have a minimum prototype that I can test and go ahead. And after that, until I get done and decide if it's a good idea or not, I at least have this cycle in my head that, it's crazy, because you start to apply design thinking in everything that you are doing is from now on. So
it's taking over.
It's great. Yeah.
We also got a brief glimpse there of Alicia's husband.
Yeah, just walked in with the dog.
So at least one user has appeared in the final course. That's good.
Yeah.
Alicia, do you have a final? I used to think, but now I think.
Yes, very much so. I used to think that as the teacher, I had to be in control of the classroom. So I'm handed this curriculum package, and I have to decide how to deliver that to my students. I have to decide to a certain extent how that is going to be assessed. And I used to feel very much like if someone walked in my room, like my principal or a parent, if it didn't look controlled, then I would not be judged very positively. And what I think now is the students really have to be the ones who help determine what they're going to learn and how they're going to learn it. I mean, to a certain extent, yes, I have a curriculum that I'm supposed to be delivering, but they have to be the major players. And there is a way to control, that's still controlled chaos. It may look like chaos to someone walking in, but where the students are deciding, this is what we're going to learn and this is how we're going to learn it.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. And if people question you, can tell them that you have MIT experts who have told you that this is an acceptable approach. And they're very supportive of your work. Well, Edson and Alicia, we're super grateful for you hanging out with us for an afternoon, staying up late or getting out of school a little bit early to be able to spend some time with us, because you guys have been great participants in this course, and we're super grateful for your insights both this afternoon and throughout. So we have the course is getting ready to close up. If you haven't yet submitted your completion checklists, you should go ahead and do that, especially for any of you who applied for a verified certificate in the next few hours. The course is going to close. And then we would also absolutely love to have everyone complete the post-course survey. Those are incredibly useful for us in learning how we can improve and going back to our generous funders, Microsoft, and telling them about all the great work that we're doing. There's also a course forum that'll be open for a little while longer, and that'll be a great way for you to share what you're thinking. We're super grateful to the whole course staff that has put the course together for us. Liz and Alyssa and Rachel and Garrett, and then our community TAs, Vladna and Brandon, who are incredibly helpful throughout the course in helping us surface some of the great work that was happening and supporting educators throughout. So I'm incredibly grateful to the whole team. And of course, thanks to all of you as learners and participants, whether you're hanging out here or watching this afterwards or other kinds of times and places. We're super grateful that you could be here. We hope that all this was helpful for you, and looking forward to staying in touch online. So Alicia and Edson, thanks again for hanging out with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I hope everybody has a great, if you're in Australia, I hope you get ready to have a great day. If you're in Croatia, I wish you good night. And everybody in between can have whatever time of day they're supposed to have. All right, thanks everybody. Take care.
Thank you.